Brandon Mitchell wanted to humiliate his ex-wife one final time before he married up. He sent her a text message that made his friends laugh and his fiancée smile. "Since you always talked about serving others, come serve drinks at my wedding. I'll pay you $500. Wear black. Try to blend in." He thought she would show up desperate, broken, maybe even grateful for the money. But when Shayla Washington stepped out of a white Maybach at the Plaza Hotel, wearing a diamond watch worth more than his annual salary, his bride Madison nearly collapsed. The same woman he'd called just practice was now the billionaire CEO who controlled Madison's entire career, her salary, her future, everything. And that was just the beginning. Once upon a time in the polished halls of Yale Law School, there lived a man named Brandon Mitchell. He was 28 years old with blonde hair that always looked freshly cut, blue eyes that women called striking, and a smile that he'd practiced in mirrors since he was 16. His father owned Mitchell Capital, a hedge fund worth $800 million. His mother, Patricia, wore Chanel-like armor and sat on the boards of the Met and MoMA, reminding people at every opportunity. Brandon walked through Yale like he owned it, because in many ways, men like him did. Brooks Brothers suits even for classes. A BMW that his father's assistant had delivered. Weekends in the Hamptons. Summers in Martha's Vineyard. He was everything that old money produced, polished, confident, and completely certain that the world owed him something simply because of his last name. But there was one crack in his perfect armor. One thing that made him different from the other trust fund boys who drifted through Yale Law on family connections and mediocre grades. He had fallen in love with someone his family would never, ever approve of. Her name was Shayla Washington, and she was not supposed to be part of his story. Shayla was 24, a black woman from the south side of Chicago, where gunshots were more common than birdsong and corner stores had bulletproof glass. She had skin the color of dark honey, natural hair that she wore in neat twists because she couldn't afford regular salon visits, and eyes that carried a kind of quiet determination that made people either respect her immediately or underestimate her completely. She wasn't a Yale student. She couldn't afford to be. She was a paralegal at a small immigration law firm making $35,000 a year, working 50-hour weeks helping families fight deportation orders and visa denials. But every evening at 6 o'clock, she would walk 15 minutes across New Haven to the Yale Law Library where she worked as a night clerk, shelving books, cleaning study rooms, helping entitled law students find case files they were too lazy to look for themselves. She did this because being surrounded by law books, by the possibility of what she could become, kept her dreams alive. She was taking online courses through community college, 4 classes at a time, slowly building toward the credits she'd need to, one day, maybe, possibly apply to law school herself. It was a dream that seemed impossible most days. But Shayla had learned early that impossible just meant you had to work 3 times harder than everyone else. They met on a February evening when the library was almost empty and snow was falling outside the tall windows. Brandon had been looking for a case file on international trade law, something about tariff regulations that he needed for a paper due at midnight. He was stressed, running late, and completely lost in the labyrinth of library stacks. "Excuse me," he'd said to the woman restocking books on a cart. "Do you know where the international trade section is?" Shayla had looked up from her cart, taking in his expensive coat and his frustrated expression. "3rd floor, east wing, follow the signs for economic law and it'll be in the same section." "Thank you." He'd started to walk away, then turned back. "You work here every night?" 6 to midnight, 5 days a week?" His eyes had widened slightly. "That's brutal. Are you a student?" She'd hesitated, suddenly aware of how she must look in her simple black pants and library polo shirt compared to his cashmere and confidence. "Part-time, online courses." Something in his expression had shifted. Not pity exactly, but something close to admiration. "That's incredible. Most people just complain about how hard things are. You're actually doing something about it." That had been the beginning. For 2 years, it was beautiful. Brandon would stay late at the library just to walk Shayla home. He'd bring her coffee during her shifts, the expensive kind from the place near campus that she'd never buy for herself. He'd help her study for her online exams, quiz her on constitutional law and civil procedure, telling her she was smarter than half the people in his classes. He'd told her once, lying on the floor of her tiny studio apartment that smelled like the vanilla candles she bought from the dollar store. "You're not like the girls I grew up with. They're so fake, so obsessed with appearances. You're real, Shayla. You make me want to be better." And she'd believed him. God help her, she'd believed every word and date. They got married in a courthouse on a Thursday afternoon. No family because his had made it very clear they wouldn't attend. No big reception because they couldn't afford it. Just them, two random witnesses pulled from the courthouse hallway, and a judge who'd seemed bored by the whole thing. His mother had called that night. Shayla had been washing dishes in their new apartment, a one-bedroom in a neighborhood that was trying very hard to be called up and coming, when Brandon's phone rang. She'd heard his mother's voice even from across the room, sharp and cold as January wind. "Brandon, darling, please tell me this is some kind of phase. Please tell me you haven't actually married that girl." Brandon had stepped onto their small balcony to finish the conversation. But Shayla had heard enough. She'd stood at the sink, hands in soapy water, and felt the first crack in her fairy tale. But back then, Brandon had come back inside, wrapped his arms around her from behind, and whispered, "Ignore her. I chose you. That's all that matters." Back then, she'd believed that too. The poison started slowly, so slowly she didn't notice it at first. It began in year 3, right after Brandon made junior partner at Sullivan and Cromwell. Suddenly, his salary jumped from $70,000 to $850,000 a year. Suddenly, he was invited to dinners at the Union Club, golf weekends in Connecticut, galas at the Met where tickets cost $10,000 a plate. And suddenly, Shayla's work at a civil rights nonprofit making $62,000 a year seemed, in his words, quaint. The first time he said it, they were getting dressed for a firm dinner. Shayla had bought a new dress with money she'd saved for 2 months, a simple black sheath that she thought looked elegant. She'd been excited, actually excited, to meet the people Brandon worked with, to be introduced as his wife. But when she'd come out of the bathroom, Brandon had looked up from adjusting his tie and frowned. "Is that what you're wearing?" She'd stopped. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing. It's just the other partners' wives, they dress very, I don't know, polished. Maybe you could wear something with more color? And could you straighten your hair?" The words had landed like a slap. "Straighten my hair?" He'd rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly not meeting her eyes. "I just mean it's a formal event. The senior partners' wives, they're very put together, very, you know." "White?" The word had come out sharper than she'd intended. "Shayla, don't make this about race. You just asked me to chemically alter my hair to fit in with your colleagues' wives. How is that not about race?" He'd grabbed his wallet and keys. "Forget it. Wear whatever you want. Let's just go." But the damage was done. She'd worn the dress and left her hair natural, and the entire evening she'd felt his tension, his embarrassment, the way he'd steered conversations away from what she did for work, the way he'd laughed too loud at his boss's jokes and barely looked at her. On the cab ride home, she'd asked quietly, "Are you ashamed of me?" And he'd said nothing, just stared out the window at the New York lights, his jaw tight, his silence louder than any answer. That should have been her first warning. But love makes you stupid, makes you give second chances to people who've already shown you exactly who they are. The real breaking point came 6 months later. It was the Sullivan and Cromwell annual gala at the Plaza Hotel, the same plaza where, years later, his wedding would fall apart. Shayla had just passed the bar exam. She was officially a lawyer now, working at a small civil rights firm that fought police brutality cases and housing discrimination. She was proud of her work, proud that she was using her degree to help people who looked like her, who came from neighborhoods like hers. She'd worn her best gown that night, a deep blue dress she'd found on sale, and she'd felt beautiful, powerful, like she finally belonged in Brandon's world. The managing partner, Richard Hartwell, had approached them during cocktail hour. He was 60, silver-haired, with the kind of confident smile that came from generations of wealth and Yale degrees. "Brandon, stellar work on the Steinberg merger, absolutely stellar." "Thank you, sir, I appreciate that." Richard had turned to Shayla, his smile polite but patronizing. "And who is this lovely young lady?" Brandon had hesitated, Just 1 second, maybe two, but Shayla had felt it like a punch to the stomach. This is Shayla. She helps with, administrative things. The world had tilted. Administrative things. Richard's wife Eleanor had lit up. Oh, how wonderful. Brandon, you're so lucky to have such dedicated support staff. It's impossible to find good help these days. Support staff, Shayla had repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor hadn't noticed. We just had to let our third assistant go. They're so unreliable nowadays. You must give Brandon our number if you ever need extra work, dear. They'd walked away, leaving Shayla standing there, holding a champagne flute so tight she thought the glass might shatter. She'd turned to Brandon slowly. Administrative help? He wouldn't meet her eyes. Shayla, not here. You introduced me as your assistant. I'm your wife. I'm a lawyer. You work at a non-profit, he'd hissed, finally looking at her, and his eyes were cold. Do you know how that sounds? The other partners' wives went to Wellesley, to Barnard, to Smith. They sit on charity boards. They don't work at legal aid clinics in the Bronx. Her hands had started shaking. You're ashamed of me. I'm ashamed of how it looks. She'd set down her champagne glass very carefully. I'm leaving. Shayla, don't make a scene. A scene? Her voice had risen despite herself. You just erased me in front of your entire firm. You erased our marriage. You erased everything I've worked for. There's no scene left to make. She'd walked out of the plaza that night in her discount gown and taken the subway home to their Upper East Side apartment, crying the entire way while tourists and night shift workers pretended not to notice. Brandon had come home 3 hours later, smelling like cigars and scotch, and found her packing a bag. What are you doing? What does it look like? He'd grabbed her arm, not hard, but firm enough to make her stop. Shayla, you're overreacting. Am I? She'd pulled free. Tell me something, Brandon. When did you stop loving me? When you made partner? When your salary hit 7 figures? When you realized your black wife from the South Side was bad for your image? This isn't about race. Everything is about race. She'd spun to face him, tears streaming down her face. Your mother told you I wasn't suitable. Your father won't add you to the family trust because you married beneath you. Your colleagues look at me like I'm the help. And tonight, you confirmed what they all thought, that I'm not your equal. I'm your embarrassment. You're twisting this. Then tell me I'm wrong. Look me in the eye and tell me you're proud to be married to me. He'd opened his mouth, closed it, looked away. And in that silence, Shayla's heart had shattered into pieces so small she'd thought she'd never be able to put them back together. She'd slept on the couch that night, and the next night, and the one after that. 2 weeks later, Brandon had come home from work and said without preamble, I think we need to talk about our future. She'd known what was coming, had felt it building like a storm. I've been thinking, he'd said, pouring himself whiskey like this was just another business negotiation. We got married young. We were different people then. I was a law student with nothing. You were working 3 jobs. We were in survival mode. Get to the point, Brandon. He'd taken a long drink. I've evolved. My career has evolved. I need a partner who can navigate the world I'm building. Someone who understands dinner parties at the Harvard Club, charity galas, summers in the Hamptons. Someone like Madison Harrison? His face had confirmed what she'd already known. Madison, the blonde trust fund girl his mother kept inviting to family events. Madison, who'd gone to Vassar and then Oxford. Madison, who'd never had to work a day in her life but somehow had a CV full of prestigious unpaid internships and volunteer positions at museums. Madison, who was everything Shayla could never be. White, wealthy, connected. Madison understands my world, Brandon had said, and he'd actually had the audacity to sound regretful about it. She grew up in it. You and I, Shayla, we come from different places. I thought love would be enough, but it's not. Shayla had stood up very slowly. You're right about one thing. We do come from different places. I come from a place where loyalty matters, where you don't abandon people who stood by you when you had nothing. where you don't trade up when someone better comes along. That's not fair. You want to know what's not fair? I paid your last year of law school tuition when your dad's hedge fund was under investigation. I worked 60-hour weeks so you could do unpaid internships that looked good on your resume. I believed in you when you were just another mediocre white boy with a trust fund and a dream. She'd grabbed her jacket from the back of the chair. And now that you've made it, now that you're somebody, you want to erase me from the story. Well, congratulations, Brandon. You win. I'm leaving. Where are you going? Anywhere you're not. She'd walked to the door, then turned back one last time. You're going to regret this. Not because you'll miss me, but because one day you'll realize you threw away the only person who loved you when you were nothing. He'd looked away, jaw clenched, and said nothing. 3 days later, a courier delivered divorce papers to the immigration law firm where Shayla still worked. Her boss had handed her the envelope with sympathetic eyes, and Shayla had locked herself in the bathroom to read them. Standard dissolution of marriage, division of assets, and a text message from Brandon that came through as she was reading. Shayla, you were great for who I was in law school, but I've evolved. I need someone who understands legacy, tradition, the world I'm building now. You were practice. Madison is the real thing. I'm offering you $100K settlement. Take it and move on with dignity. We're done. Practice. She'd read that word 7 times, each time feeling like she'd been stabbed. You were practice. Shayla had stood in that bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror, and made a decision. She could break, or she could build. She could believe his lies about her worth, or she could prove that she'd always been the prize and he'd been too blind to see it. That night, she'd shown up at her best friend Keisha's apartment in Harlem with 1 suitcase and a garbage bag of clothes. Keisha had opened the door in her bonnet and robe, taken one look at Shayla's face, and pulled her inside without a word. What happened? He threw me out. Shayla's voice had been hollow. He said I was practice, that Madison is the real thing. Keisha had gone completely still. He said what? I wasn't good enough for his new life. I'm from the wrong background. I don't fit in his world. Shayla had collapsed onto Keisha's couch. And the worst part? Maybe he's right. Maybe I was stupid to think a girl from the South Side could ever belong in his world. Stop that right now. Keisha had sat beside her, voice fierce. You are a lawyer. You passed the bar on your first try while working 3 jobs. You are brilliant. But I'm not blonde. I'm not from Connecticut. I'm not... You're not what he deserves, Keisha had interrupted. You're better. And I know you can't see that right now, but you will. I promise you, Shayla Washington, you will build something so big that he'll spend the rest of his life knowing he fumbled a queen. Shayla had wanted to believe her. But that night, lying on Keisha's couch, staring at the ceiling and listening to Harlem's nighttime symphony of sirens and music and life, all she could hear was Brandon's voice. You were practice. Days blurred into weeks. Shayla went to work at the immigration firm, came home to Keisha's couch, and tried to rebuild something from the wreckage of her life. But everything felt impossible. The apartment search, every listing wanted first month, last month, security deposit, amounts that might as well have been $1 million. The therapist she couldn't afford. The friends from Yale who'd stopped calling once the divorce went public. She felt erased, like she'd been written out of a story that she'd helped create. One morning, Keisha had found her crying in the bathroom at 6 a.m. That's it, Keisha had said, pulling her up from the floor. Get dressed. We're going out. Keisha, I'm not asking. Get dressed. They'd ended up at a small coffee shop in Harlem, the kind of place where old men played chess and young entrepreneurs typed on laptops and everyone knew everyone's business. Shayla had sat in the corner, nursing a latte she couldn't afford, trying to disappear into the worn leather chair. And that's when she'd heard the conversation that would change everything. 2 young lawyers at the next table, both black women in their 30s, were talking loud enough that Shayla couldn't help but overhear. Our firm can't afford Westlaw anymore, one was saying. $50,000 per user per year? We're a 5-person shop fighting housing discrimination cases. That's our entire budget. Same problem, the other replied. We're using Google Scholar and free databases. It's embarrassing. We're going up against firms with unlimited resources, and we're out here using tools from 2005. The first lawyer had sighed. There should be affordable legal research software, something for small firms and nonprofits. We shouldn't have to choose between paying staff and accessing basic legal tools. Shayla had sat very still, her lawyer brain suddenly activating for the first time in weeks. She'd seen this problem at her own firm. Big law firms like Sullivan and Cromwell had unlimited access to every legal database, every research tool, every advantage. Small firms, solo practitioners, nonprofits, they were priced out of the tools they needed to compete. Justice was being decided not by who had the better argument, but by who could afford the better research. That afternoon, Shayla had called her former Yale classmate, Marcus Fisher. They'd studied together, pulled all-nighters in the library, commiserated about impossible professors. After graduation, Marcus had gone to Google as a software engineer while Shayla had gone to legal aid. Marcus, I need to ask you something. Shayla, how are you? I heard about, I'm sorry. I'm fine. Listen, what if we built affordable legal research software, AI-powered research tools for small firms and nonprofits? Instead of $50,000 a year, what if we charged $200 a month? Silence on the other end. Then, Shayla, that's a billion-dollar idea. Her heart had started racing. You think? I know, legal tech is exploding, but all the major players are focused on big law firms. No one's serving the small firm market. If you could build something affordable and actually good, you'd dominate. But I have no money, no investors. I'm sleeping on my friend's couch. How much do you need for an MVP? I don't know, $500,000? To hire developers, build the platform, beta test? Let me make some calls. I know people. 3 days later, Marcus called back. Pack something nice. You have a meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Tribeca. Meeting with who? Diane Fisher. Shayla had almost dropped her phone. The Diane Fisher? The billionaire? Yep, she's Taiwanese American, made $4 billion in fintech. Now she invests in women-led startups. She wants to meet you. Marcus, I don't even have a pitch deck. She doesn't want a deck. She wants to meet you. Don't be late. The next morning, Shayla had taken the subway to Tribeca wearing her only good suit, the one she'd worn to her bar exam results. Her hands had been shaking the entire ride. Diane Fisher's penthouse overlooked the Hudson River. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the water like a painting. Modern art on the walls. Fresh flowers on every surface. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because it was so obvious. Diane herself had been in the living room, 58 years old, wearing Armani and radiating the kind of power that made Shayla simultaneously terrified and inspired. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob. Her glasses were Cartier. Her handshake was firm. Shayla Washington, sit. Shayla had sat on a white couch that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. Marcus tells me you want to democratize legal research. Yes, ma'am. Diane had leaned back, studying her with eyes that seemed to see everything. Why you? Shayla had taken a breath. This was it, her one shot. Because I've been on both sides, Ms. Fisher. I've seen what it's like when you have every resource. My ex-husband works at Sullivan and Cromwell. They spend millions on research tools without blinking, and I've worked at legal aid clinics where we're fighting deportations and housing discrimination with free Google searches because we can't afford anything else. She'd leaned forward, passion overriding nervousness. The gap isn't just unfair, it's unjust. It means that justice isn't blind, it's for sale, and I want to change that. Diane had been quiet for a long moment, then, Sullivan and Cromwell. That's Brandon Mitchell's firm. Shayla's eyes had widened. How did you... I know the Mitchell family. Diane's smile had been cold. Patricia Mitchell once told me at a gala that people like us should leave philanthropy to people who understand culture and tradition, whatever the hell that means. Despite everything, Shayla had almost laughed. Diane had continued. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm giving you $5 million. The room had spun. Ma'am? Not 500,000, 5 million. You'll build your platform, hire the best engineers, beta test with real firms, and when you're ready to scale, come back to me. I'll give you 50 million more. Shayla's hands had been trembling. Ms. Fisher, I don't know what to say. Diane had stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city. Say yes, then go build something that makes everyone who underestimated you choke on their regret. She'd turned back, her expression softer. I see myself in you, Shayla. I came to this country with nothing. People who looked like me, who sounded like me, we were told to be grateful for whatever scraps we got, to not aim too high, to know our place. Her voice had hardened. I built a $4 billion company to prove them wrong. Now it's your turn. Shayla had stood on shaking legs, walked over and shaken Diane's hand. Yes, thank you, I won't let you down. I know you won't, because women like us, we don't get second chances. We make our first chance count. As Shayla had left that penthouse, riding the elevator down to street level, she'd felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the fragile, desperate kind, but something solid and burning and absolutely certain. Brandon had called her practice. She was about to show him what a warm-up really looked like. The next 4 years were a blur of 18-hour days, pitched battles with code that wouldn't work, and victories so small they felt like miracles. Year 1 had been brutal. Shayla had hired 3 engineers with Diane's money, rented a tiny office space in a WeWork in Brooklyn, and worked until her eyes burned and her back ached. Marcus had joined part-time, building the AI algorithms that would power their legal research tools. They'd launched EquiLaw in month 11 with exactly 100 beta users. Small law firms, solo practitioners, legal aid clinics. People who couldn't afford Westlaw but desperately needed something better than Google. The software was clunky at first. The search function would break. The case citations were sometimes wrong. But they fixed every bug, answered every support email personally, and slowly, painfully, built something that worked. Revenue that first year, $240,000. Shayla had moved from Keisha's couch to a studio apartment in Crown Heights. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Year 2 had been the breakthrough. Word spread among small firms and nonprofits. EquiLaw worked. It was affordable. It was made by people who actually understood their struggles. 4,000 law firms signed up. Shayla had expanded the platform to include contract analysis and case prediction AI. Diane had led a Series A funding round, $15 million. The valuation had hit $60 million. Revenue, $9.6 million. Shayla had moved to a 1-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights and bought her first car, a clean used Lexus that she'd cried in the first time she'd sat in the driver's seat because it was hers, bought with money she'd earned, and no one could take it away. Year 3 was when everything exploded. EquiLaw became the fastest-growing legal tech company in America. Shayla had launched a staffing division, EquiLaw Talent, placing lawyers at top firms. She'd raised $80 million in Series B funding. The company's valuation had hit $400 million. Forbes had featured her. The woman revolutionizing access to justice. She'd moved to a penthouse in Soho with views of the entire city. She'd bought a white Maybach S-Class, the kind of car that made valets nervous. She'd walked into a Patek Philippe boutique and bought herself a diamond-encrusted watch for $850,000 because she could, because she'd earned it, because every time she looked at it, she'd remember that she'd built this. Revenue that year, $67 million. And in year 4, everything had changed forever. Shayla had raised $200 million in Series C funding. EquiLaw's valuation had hit $1.2 billion. They'd expanded to all 50 states, plus the UK, Canada, and Australia. 12,000 law firms were now clients. Revenue, $180 million. Her personal net worth, $420 million on paper, over $1 billion in equity. Time magazine had named her one of the 100 most influential people. The feature had included a photo of her in her Soho office, natural hair and an elegant updo, wearing a power suit and her Patek Philippe, looking directly at the camera with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was. But Shayla had stayed private. No Instagram showing off her wealth. No reality TV, no public relationships or club photos or any of the things that tech billionaires usually did. Just work, just building, just proving every single day that she'd always been enough. One morning, standing in her penthouse in silk pajamas, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise over New York, she'd thought about Brandon's text. "You were practice." And she'd smiled. "No, baby," she'd whispered to the empty apartment. "I was the blueprint. You just couldn't read it." She'd had no idea that the universe was about to give her the chance to prove it. What happens when Shayla discovers that Brandon's new fiancé works for one of her client firms? What will she do when Brandon invites her to serve drinks at his wedding? And how will the most powerful woman in legal tech respond when given the chance to show her ex-husband exactly what he threw away? Keep watching to find out. While Shayla Washington was building a billion-dollar empire in a Soho penthouse, Brandon Mitchell sat in his corner office at Sullivan and Cromwell, staring at his phone screen like it held answers to questions he didn't want to ask. He'd made senior partner. His salary had jumped to $1.4 million a year. He drove a Porsche 911. He lived in a penthouse on the Upper East Side with heated floors and a doorman who called him Sir. But something was wrong. He couldn't sleep anymore. Not really. Madison would be beside him, her blonde hair spread across the Egyptian cotton pillowcase, her breathing soft and even, and Brandon would lie there staring at the ceiling, thinking about a woman he'd thrown away 4 years ago. Where was Shayla now? He'd blocked her on everything after the divorce, told himself it was healthier that way, cleaner. But lately, he'd been unblocking her Instagram late at night, scrolling through her feed looking for, what, evidence that he'd been right? That she was struggling without him? Her account was private, 0 posts visible. Her profile picture was just the EquiLaw logo. That had bothered him more than he wanted to admit. One evening, after 3 scotches at the Union Club, he'd made the mistake of Googling her name. The results had made his blood run cold. Forbes. Shayla Washington, 32, leads legal tech revolution with 1.2B valuation. TechCrunch. EquiLaw raises $200 million. Series C becomes fastest growing legal platform. Bloomberg. How Shayla Washington built a billion-dollar company after divorce. He'd clicked on the Forbes article with shaking hands. There she was, professional headshot, natural hair styled elegantly, wearing a suit that probably cost more than his first car, standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows with the New York skyline behind her like she owned it. The article called her one of the most influential figures in legal technology and estimated her personal net worth at $420 million. Brandon had thrown his phone across his office. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. The paralegal who'd worked 3 jobs, the woman from the South Side who'd eaten ramen for dinner most nights, the wife he'd called practice, was now worth almost $500 million. He'd picked up his phone with shaking hands and read the entire article. Then he'd read 3 more. Then he'd watched a YouTube video of her keynote at a legal tech conference where she'd spoken about building companies that serve justice, not just profit. She'd looked powerful, confident, free, and Brandon had felt something he hadn't felt in years. Regret so deep it felt like drowning. "You okay, bro?" His best man Chad had walked into his office, noticed the Forbes article still open on his computer screen. "Is that your ex-wife?" Brandon had slammed the laptop closed. "It's nothing." "Dude, she's a billionaire. And you—" Chad had stopped himself, but they'd both known what he was about to say. "And you left her." That night, Brandon had gone home to Madison, who'd been planning their wedding with the intensity of a military operation. She'd been on the phone with the florist, arguing about whether the roses should be ivory or champagne, and all Brandon could think about was Shayla's face in that Forbes photo. Calm, powerful, unbothered, like she'd never needed him at all. "Brandon, are you listening?" Madison had snapped her fingers in front of his face. "The florist needs an answer by tomorrow." "Whatever you want is fine," she'd frowned. "You've been distant lately. What's going on?" "Nothing, wedding stress." "Well, speaking of the wedding, I started my new job today." Brandon had looked up. "New job?" "At Hartley and Lane. I told you about this. The boutique firm that specializes in international corporate law. It's such a step up from where I was." "That's great, babe. Who placed you?" this amazing legal staffing company called EquiLaw Talent. They handle all the premium placements. I'm hoping to meet the CEO eventually. Apparently, she's this incredible black woman who built the company from nothing. Very inspiring. Brandon's drink had stopped halfway to his mouth. EquiLaw? Yeah, you've heard of them? They're huge in the legal tech space. Anyway, the CEO personally approves all major placements, so I'm hoping she'll... The CEO's name is Shayla Washington. Madison had blinked. How did you know that? Because she's my ex-wife. The silence in their apartment had been deafening. Your... what? My ex-wife, Shayla. She owns EquiLaw. Madison had set down her wine glass very carefully. The woman you told me was working at some small nonprofit? The woman you said couldn't handle the pressure of your world? I didn't know she's worth over $1 billion, Brandon. She controls the entire legal staffing industry. Madison's face had gone pale. Oh my God. She placed me at Hartley and Lane. She has access to my employment contract, my performance reviews, everything. I'm sure it's fine. Fine? Madison's voice had risen to a pitch that made their neighbor's dog start barking through the wall. Your ex-wife, the woman you divorced, now has control over my career, and you think it's fine? Madison, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. What did you do to her, Brandon? How did you leave things? He'd looked away. Brandon, answer me. I might have said some things I regret. What things? The silence had stretched so long that the ice in his drink had melted. I told her she was practice, he'd finally admitted. That she wasn't good enough for my world. That you were the real thing. Madison had stared at him like he'd just confessed to murder. You told a woman who's now a billionaire that she was practice? I didn't know she'd become... That's your defense? That you only emotionally destroyed her because you thought she'd stay poor? That's not what I meant. I need to call my lawyer. Madison had grabbed her phone. I need to know what she can do to my contract. If she can fire me, if she can... She won't do anything. Shayla's not like that. Madison had laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You don't know what she's like. You haven't seen her in 4 years. People change, Brandon, especially when you treat them like garbage. She'd stormed into their bedroom and slammed the door. Brandon had sat alone in their living room, surrounded by wedding planning binders and floral samples, and realized he might have made a catastrophic mistake. Not in leaving Shayla. He'd convinced himself he'd been right about that. But in underestimating what she'd become. 2 weeks before the wedding, Brandon had done something spectacularly stupid. He'd been drinking with his groomsmen at a bar in Midtown, celebrating his bachelor party, when Chad had brought up Shayla again. Dude, are you seriously not going to address the elephant in the room? What elephant? Your billionaire ex-wife who controls your fiancé's job. That's not weird to you? The other groomsmen had gone quiet. Brandon had ordered another whiskey. What am I supposed to do about it? I don't know, maybe send her a message, clear the air, make sure she's not going to, I don't know, ruin your wedding or something? Shayla wouldn't do that. How do you know? Because I know her. Bro, you knew her 4 years ago. She's different now. She's powerful now. The whiskey had made Brandon bold and stupid. You know what? You're right. I should reach out. Show her there's no hard feelings. That's not what But Brandon was already typing on his phone, the alcohol loosening the parts of his brain that usually prevented catastrophically bad decisions. He'd stared at Shayla's contact, still saved under S from years ago when things were good, and typed, Hi Shayla, it's Brandon. I'm getting married next month at the Plaza. I know this might sound strange, but we're short on cocktail servers for the reception. You always talked about working in service to others. Figured I'd offer you $500 to serve drinks. Wear all black. Try to blend in. It's good money for a few hours of work. Consider it closure. Let me know. B. He'd hit send before his friends could stop him. Dude, what did you just do? Chad had grabbed his phone, read the message, and gone completely pale. Are you insane? What? I'm offering her work. She probably needs the money. Brandon, she's worth $500 million. She doesn't need your $500. Then she won't respond. But she had. 3 hours later, while Brandon was stumbling out of an Uber, his phone had buzzed. Brandon, I'll be there. See you at the Plaza. S. That was it. No mention of serving. No acknowledgement of the insult. Just confirmation. Chad had read it over his shoulder. Bro, I have a really bad feeling about this. She's just being professional. It's fine. Nothing about this is fine. But Brandon had been too drunk and too arrogant to listen. He'd gone home that night thinking he'd won some kind of victory, that Shayla showing up to serve at his wedding would be the final proof that he'd made the right choice, that he'd traded up, that he'd evolved beyond her. He had no idea he'd just set up his own destruction. The morning of the wedding, the Plaza Hotel looked like something from a fairy tale, or a nightmare, depending on your perspective. 1,000 white roses arranged in crystal vases, chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses, ice sculptures of swans, a champagne tower that required structural engineering, an 18-piece orchestra from Vienna. Fireworks scheduled for 10 p.m., the total cost, $800,000. Patricia Mitchell had spared no expense for her son's wedding to a suitable bride. Brandon stood in the terrace room, adjusting his Tom Ford tuxedo for the 15th time, while his groomsmen lounged on velvet furniture meant for display, not sitting. You ready for this? Chad asked, nursing a mimosa. I've never been more ready for anything. You sure about that? Because you look like you're about to throw up. I'm fine. Have you heard from Shayla? Brandon's jaw tightened. No, and I don't expect to. She probably realized it was beneath her. Or she's planning something. You're being paranoid. But Chad wasn't. And deep down, Brandon knew it. Across the hotel, in the bridal suite that cost $12,000 for the day, Madison sat in front of a mirror while 4 people worked on her hair, makeup, and nails simultaneously. Her maid of honor, Ashley, was reading headlines on her phone. Oh my God, Madison looked up. What? There's a profile on Shayla Washington in this month's Fortune. Want to hear it? Not really. Ashley read anyway. At 32, Shayla Washington has built something most people spend lifetimes chasing. A company that matters. EquiLaw isn't just profitable, it's revolutionary. By making legal research affordable, Washington has leveled the playing field for thousands of lawyers who were priced out of justice. Madison's hands clenched in her lap. Ashley continued. When asked about her biggest challenge, Washington doesn't mention competitors or technology. She mentions belief. Believing she deserved a seat at the table. Believing her background was a strength, not a weakness. Believing that the people who underestimated her were wrong. Ashley, stop. There's more. Washington credits her ex-husband's betrayal as the catalyst that freed her. In her words, he thought throwing me away would break me. Instead, it unleashed me. Madison stood up so fast her makeup artist yelped. Get out! What? Everyone out. I need a minute. The team had scrambled out, leaving Madison alone in her $40,000 Vera Wang gown, staring at herself in the mirror. She looked perfect. Hair in soft curls, makeup flawless. The picture of everything a Mitchell bride should be. But inside, she felt sick. She'd known about Shayla, of course. Known that Brandon had been married before. But he'd painted such a specific picture. A woman who couldn't handle his success, who resented his ambition, who'd tried to hold him back. Now, Madison was realizing she'd only heard one side of the story, and that story was looking less and less accurate. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. Darling, there's a situation. A white Maybach just pulled up. Very expensive, not on the guest list. Security is asking what to do. Madison's stomach dropped. She grabbed her phone and called Brandon. Hey, babe, almost time. Is Shayla coming to the wedding? Silence. Brandon, answer me. I might have invited her. You what? To serve drinks as a server. It's fine, she probably won't even... Madison hung up and ran to the window. Down below, in the circular drive in front of the plaza, sat a white Maybach S-Class that probably cost more than the wedding budget. The valet opened the door, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd stepped off the cover of a magazine. Champagne silk gown by a designer Madison recognized from Fashion Week, natural hair in an updo that had probably taken hours. And a watch. Even from the 5th floor, Madison could see the diamonds catching the light. That wasn't a woman coming to serve drinks. That was a woman coming to end worlds. "Oh God," Madison whispered. "What did you do, Brandon?" Inside the grand ballroom, the ceremony had started right on time at 6:30 p.m. Brandon stood at the altar trying to focus on the officiant's words, but his palms were sweating and his heart was racing for all the wrong reasons. Where was Shayla? Had she come? Was she in the service area, wearing black, blending in like he'd asked? The thought gave him a strange satisfaction. Proof that he'd been right. Proof that... The whispers started at the back of the room, low at first, then louder. Guests turning around, phones coming out. "Is that a Maybach?" Brandon's head snapped toward the entrance. Through the massive doors of the grand ballroom backlit by the plaza's chandelier-lit hallway, walked Shayla Washington. She moved like time had slowed down just for her entrance. Each step deliberate, each movement graceful. The champagne silk of her gown catching light like liquid gold. But it wasn't the dress that made the room go silent. It was the way she carried herself. Like she owned not just the room, but the building, the block, the city. Security had rushed toward her, one hand up in a stopping gesture. "Ma'am, the ceremony has started. If you're with catering, please use the service entrance." Shayla had handed him a business card without breaking stride, her heels clicking on marble like a countdown. The security guard had looked at the card, looked at his tablet. His eyes had gone wide. "Ms. Washington, my sincere apologies. Right this way." He'd led her not to the service area where Brandon had imagined her, but to the front row, VIP section, dead center. Brandon's knees had nearly buckled. "Bro," Chad whispered urgently. "Bro, is that—" "It can't be." "It is. That's your ex-wife, and she looks like $1 billion, Brandon finished numbly. Shayla sat down, crossed her legs with practiced elegance, placed her designer clutch on her lap, and looked straight ahead, directly at him. Her expression was calm, peaceful, not angry, not bitter, just present, and somehow that was more terrifying than anything else could have been. Patricia Mitchell grabbed her husband's arm. "Richard, oh, is that the paralegal?" Richard had his reading glasses on, squinting at the program. "That woman is on the VIP list. Says here she's CEO of EquiLaw, net worth listed as $420 million. Patricia's champagne flute had slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The officiant cleared his throat nervously. "Shall we continue?" But Brandon couldn't focus, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was seeing. The woman he'd offered $500 to serve drinks at his wedding had just walked in wearing what looked like $50,000 of clothing and jewelry. The woman he'd called Practice was sitting in the VIP section while Madison's own family had been relegated to the second row. The woman he'd thrown away had become everything he'd thought was impossible, and she'd done it without him. The ceremony continued around him like he was underwater, sounds muffled, time distorted. Then the bridal march began. Pachelbel's canon in D filled the ballroom. The doors opened. Madison appeared in her $40,000 dress, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless, everything that a Mitchell bride should be. She started down the aisle, smiling at guests, but Brandon could see the tightness around her eyes. Halfway down, Madison's gaze had locked onto the woman in the front row. Her steps faltered. The bouquet trembled in her hands. She reached the altar, took Brandon's hand. It was ice cold, and leaned in close. "Brandon," she whispered urgently, "that's Shayla Washington, the CEO of EquiLaw, the woman who placed me at Hartley and Lane." "I know." "You know?" Her voice rose slightly. "She controls my entire career, and you didn't think to mention she'd be here?" "I invited her to serve drinks. Does she look like she's here to serve drinks?" The officiant, sensing tension, tried to push forward. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." But Madison wasn't listening. She was staring at Shayla's Patek Philippe, at the Maybach keys visible in her clutch, at the sheer, undeniable power radiating from her. Then she turned back to Brandon, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and fury. "Is that your ex-wife?" The question had been picked up by the microphone. The entire ballroom, All 1,000 guests heard it. The room went dead silent. Even the orchestra stopped mid-note. "Madison," Brandon hissed, "not now. You invited your ex-wife? The woman you told me was bitter and struggling? The woman who's now a billionaire?" The guests erupted in whispers. Phones came out. Patricia Mitchell stood up. "Madison, darling, perhaps we should—" "Sit down, Patricia," Madison snapped, and the older woman actually flinched. Madison turned to face the audience, her veil askew, her perfect makeup starting to run. "Does anyone else think it's strange that my fiancé's billionaire ex-wife is sitting in the front row of our wedding?" The officiant tried desperately. "Perhaps if we could just—" "If anyone has objections to this union," he started the traditional line. Shayla stood up. Slowly, gracefully, every eye in the ballroom turned to her. She didn't shout, didn't raise her voice, didn't show any emotion except a kind of calm certainty. "I don't object to this marriage," she said clearly, her voice carrying through the silent room. "But I do think the bride deserves to know who she's marrying." The room exploded in gasps and whispers. Brandon found his voice. "Shayla, don't—" She ignored him completely, speaking directly to Madison. "Ms. Harrison Mitchell, we've never formally met. I'm Shayla Washington, CEO of EquiLaw. My company placed you at Hartley and Lane 3 weeks ago. You've been doing excellent work, by the way. Your brief on the Steinberg case was particularly impressive." Madison looked like she might faint. "Thank you? But there's something you should know." Shayla pulled out her phone with one hand, the gesture so casual it was almost worse than if she'd been dramatic about it. "2 weeks ago, your fiancé sent me a text message. With your permission, I'd like to share it." "Shayla, stop this right now." Brandon started forward, but Chad grabbed his arm. Shayla nodded to someone in the back. The massive projection screens on either side of the altar lit up. Screens meant to show romantic photos of the bride and groom. Instead, they showed a text message in 10-foot-tall letters. "Hi, Shayla, it's Brandon. I'm getting married next month at the Plaza. I know this might sound strange, but we're short on cocktail servers for the reception. You always talked about working in service to others. Figured I'd offer you $500 to serve drinks. Wear all black. Try to blend in. It's good money for a few hours of work. Consider it closure. Let me know. B." The ballroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, camera flashes, people standing up to see better. Madison's bouquet fell from her hands, white peonies scattering across the marble floor like snow. "You—" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You invited your ex-wife to serve drinks at our wedding? Madison, I can explain—" "Explain?" Her voice cracked, then rose to something close to a scream. "You told me she was bitter. You said she couldn't handle your success. You said she was nobody." She gestured wildly at Shayla, who stood perfectly still, watching. "Does she look like nobody to you? She's wearing a watch that costs more than your car. She runs a billion-dollar company. She controls whether I keep my job." Patricia Mitchell tried to intervene. "Madison, sweetheart, let's not make a scene." Madison whirled on her. "A scene? Your son invited his ex-wife, a woman worth more than your entire family, to serve drinks at our wedding, and you want me not to make a scene?" She turned to Shayla, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "Ms. Washington, I am so sorry. I had no idea. He told me you were—" "I know what he told you," Shayla said gently. "He told you I was practice, that you were the real thing, that I wasn't good enough for his world." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Madison's face crumpled. "Oh my God, that's exactly what he said." Shayla took a step closer to the altar, her voice calm but carrying to every corner of the massive room. "He told me the same lies he's telling you. That I didn't fit, that I wasn't sophisticated enough, that I came from the wrong background." She looked directly at Brandon for the first time. "The truth is, I was never the problem. I was just married to a man who measures people's worth by their pedigree and their skin color. A man who will love you exactly as long as you make him look good to his mother and his firm and his country club friends." Her voice hardened slightly. "But the moment you gain weight, or choose your career over his comfort, or disagree with Patricia about the right florist, or show any sign of being a real human being instead of a trophy. He'll be looking for the next upgrade, the next real thing. She turned back to Madison. I was you once. I believed him when he said he loved me. I ignored every red flag. I shrank myself to fit into his world. And when I wasn't useful anymore, he threw me away like I was nothing. Tears were flowing freely down Madison's face now, taking her makeup with them. But here's what I learned. He was right about one thing. I didn't fit in his world. Because his world is small and shallow and built on other people's money and inherited status. Shayla's voice grew stronger. I come from the south side of Chicago where my mother cleaned houses and I ate ramen for dinner. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school. I built a company from nothing that now serves 47,000 law firms across 6 countries. She looked around the ballroom at the 1,000 guests hanging on every word. So no, I don't fit in a world that values last names over hard work, and thank God for that, because I built my own world, and it's bigger than anything the Mitchells could ever imagine. The ballroom was so silent you could hear the ice sculptures slowly melting. Madison looked at Brandon, her voice breaking. Is everything she said true? Brandon's mouth opened, closed. She's exaggerating. Did you text her to serve drinks at our wedding, yes or no? Yes, but did you tell her she was practice? Silence. Brandon, answer me! Yes, he whispered. But I was different then. You texted her 2 weeks ago, Madison screamed. You haven't changed. You're still the same cruel, classist, racist. I am not racist. You left a brilliant black woman because she didn't fit your aesthetic. Madison was fully crying now, not caring about the mascara running down her face. What the hell do you call that? She turned to her bridesmaids, her voice breaking. Get my stuff, we're leaving. Madison, please. Brandon reached for her hand. She yanked it away like he'd burned her. Don't touch me, oh. Don't ever touch me again. She pulled off her engagement ring, a 4-carat diamond that had cost Brandon 6 months' salary, and threw it at his feet. It bounced twice on the marble and rolled under a chair. I can't believe I almost married you, Madison said, her voice thick with tears and rage. I can't believe I almost became another woman you'd throw away when someone better came along. She looked at Shayla one more time. Thank you for saving me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Then Madison Harrison turned and walked out of her own wedding, her $40,000 dress trailing behind her, her bridesmaids scrambling to follow. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests shouting, cameras flashing, Patricia Mitchell being fanned by horrified relatives, the caterers frozen in place with trays of untouched appetizers, the orchestra not knowing whether to play or pack up, and in the center of it all, Brandon Mitchell, alone at the altar in his Tom Ford tuxedo, watching his perfect wedding collapse like a house of cards. Shayla turned to leave, her heels clicking on marble, calm and dignified. She was almost to the door when Brandon found his voice. Shayla, wait. She paused, but didn't turn around. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She turned slightly, enough to meet his eyes. I know you are, Brandon, but sorry doesn't give me back the 3 years I spent believing I wasn't enough. So I'll accept your apology, but I'll never forget what you did. Please, can we just talk? There's nothing to talk about. You're not part of my life anymore. You're just a mistake I survived. She walked out into the New York night, got into her Maybach, and drove away. Behind her, the Plaza Hotel buzzed with the scandal of the decade. Ahead of her, the city lights glittered like diamonds. She smiled and whispered to herself, Thank you, Brandon, for showing me I never needed you to be great. By Sunday morning, the internet had caught fire. Serve Justice was trending #1 in the United States, with over 4.2 million tweets. Shayla Washington had become a rallying cry. Brandon Mitchell was trending too, but for all the wrong reasons. Videos of Shayla's entrance had hit 89 million views across TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter combined. Someone had gotten footage of the text message on the projection screens. Another person had captured Madison throwing her ring and walking out. The story had everything: betrayal, revenge, a billionaire boss, a public humiliation, race, class, and a Plaza Hotel wedding that cost $800,000 and lasted exactly 43 minutes. It was the perfect viral storm. Keisha had shown up at Shayla's penthouse Sunday morning with bagels, coffee, and her laptop. "Sis, you need to see this." Shayla was still in her pajamas, sitting on her couch, processing the previous night. "I don't know if I want to." "Trust me, you want to." Keisha opened Twitter and started reading comments. @BlackGirlMagic. She pulled up in a Maybach to a wedding where she was invited to serve drinks. Shayla Washington is the level of petty I aspire to. #Serve Justice. @LegalTech News. Billionaire CEO Shayla Washington didn't get mad. She got richer. This is what power looks like. Shayla Washington. @The Shade Room. Y'all, this man really texted his billionaire ex-wife asking her to serve drinks at his wedding for $500. The audacity, the caucasity, I can't breathe, #Brandon Mitchell. That feminist lawyer. Can we talk about how Shayla Washington saved that bride from a lifetime of being treated like an accessory? That's sisterhood. That's using your power for good. @that Forbes. Women. When @Shayla Washington CEO said, "I built my own world and it's bigger than anything the Mitchells could imagine," I felt that in my soul. Keisha kept scrolling. There's more, so much more. The videos were everywhere. Someone had edited together a dramatic recap with music showing Shayla's entrance, the text reveal, Madison's exit, and ending with Shayla driving away. It had 47 million views. TikTok lawyers were breaking down the legal implications. If Shayla Washington wanted to, she could absolutely impact Madison's employment, but notice she didn't. She used her power to inform, not to destroy. That's the difference between revenge and justice. Fashion bloggers were analyzing her outfit. Sergio Hudson custom gown, estimated $15K. Patek Philippe watch, $850K. Jimmy Choo heels, $200. The total look? Priceless. This is how you show up to face your demons. Black women's empowerment pages were having a field day. She didn't shout, she didn't fight, she just showed up, spoke her truth, and left. This is what healing looks like. This is what winning looks like. But there were also critics. @TradWife 2024. Unpopular opinion, she should have stayed home. Going to your ex's wedding is messy regardless of how much money you have. Classy women move in silence. @Men's Rights Daily. Another example of a woman destroying a man's happiness because she can't move on. He dodged a bullet. Keisha had snorted at that one. He dodged a bullet? The man literally invited his billionaire ex to serve drinks. But most of the internet was firmly on Shayla's side. The professional implications were just as explosive. CNN Business ran a feature. Legal tech CEO Shayla Washington's company sees 400% spike in interest after wedding incident. The article detailed how EquiLaw's website had crashed Saturday night from traffic. Thousands of small law firms were signing up. Investors were calling. The company's valuation had jumped overnight. New York Times published an opinion piece. The Plaza Wedding and the Reckoning. Class, Race, and Power in Modern America. It was written by a Columbia sociology professor and dissected every aspect of what had happened. When Shayla Washington stood up at that wedding, she wasn't just confronting one man. She was confronting every system that had told her she wasn't enough. The legal establishment that prices out brilliant lawyers from poor backgrounds. The social structures that value pedigree over merit. The racial dynamics that make Black women shrink themselves to fit into white spaces. Her presence at that wedding, in a Maybach, in diamonds, in undeniable success, was a refutation of every lie Brandon Mitchell had told her. And more importantly, every lie America tells Black women about their worth. The root went with, Black woman shows up to ex's wedding looking like money, destroys his life with one screenshot. Chef's kiss. But the most significant coverage came from Bloomberg. EquiLaw valuation soars to $2.1 billion as CEO Shayla Washington becomes face of justice tech movement. The article revealed that 3 major law firms had already signed contracts with EquiLaw by Monday morning. Diane Fisher had called Shayla personally to discuss a potential IPO within the year. Shayla's personal net worth had jumped from $420 million to an estimated $850 million in 72 hours. She'd gone from billionaire adjacent to nearly touching the billion-dollar mark herself. All because she'd shown up and told the truth. "This is insane," Shayla said, scrolling through article after article. "I didn't do this for publicity." "I know," Keisha replied, "but sometimes the universe rewards you anyway. You stood up for yourself, and you saved Madison from making a huge mistake. That's worth celebrating." Shayla's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Washington, this is Madison Harrison. I know we've never properly met, but I wanted to thank you. You saved my life Saturday. I'm sorry for any role I played in your pain. If you're ever willing to talk, I'd like to hear your story. Not for gossip, for understanding. Thank you for your grace. M." Shayla showed Keisha. "Are you going to respond?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to. She's a victim in this too. She dated him while he was still married to you. She was 25 and being courted by a powerful man and his influential family. I remember what that's like, how easy it is to believe their version of events." Shayla thought for a moment, then typed, "Madison, thank you for your message. I'd be happy to meet, not to rehash the past, but to make sure you understand your worth moving forward. You're talented and you deserve better than being someone's trophy. Let me know when you're ready. S." She hit send, then turned to Keisha. "I need to see her. Not for revenge, for closure." "You're a better woman than me," Keisha said. I would have let her drown. She's not the enemy. She's collateral damage in Brandon's ego war. I remember what that feels like." They met at a quiet cafe in the West Village on Tuesday afternoon. Madison had arrived first, wearing jeans and a hoodie, the first time Shayla had seen her in anything that wasn't designer perfection. She looked younger without the makeup, more real, and completely exhausted. "Ms. Washington, Shayla, please." Madison's eyes filled with tears before she could even sit down. "I'm so sorry for everything, for dating him while you were still married." "Were you dating him while we were married?" "No, God no. We met at a charity event 6 months after your divorce, but I knew about you. His mother made sure I knew that he'd been married to someone unsuitable." Shayla felt the old familiar sting but pushed it down. "And what did Brandon tell you about me?" Madison looked down at her hands. "He said you'd grown apart, that you resented his success, that you'd tried to hold him back from opportunities because you were insecure. Did you believe him?" "I wanted to. I was 25 and this successful, handsome lawyer was interested in me. His mother approved. My parents were thrilled. It felt like a fairy tale. Until it wasn't." Madison nodded, wiping her eyes. "The cracks started showing about 6 months in. The way he'd criticize my clothes if they were too trendy. How he'd introduce me differently depending on who we were with. The way he'd get angry if I talked about my job too much at his firm events." She looked up at Shayla. "And then I started my new job at Hartley and Lane, and I found out you placed me there. That you owned EquiLaw. I Googled you and saw your Forbes profile, and I thought, this doesn't match what Brandon told me at all. What made you stay for the wedding? Honestly, sunk cost fallacy. We'd already sent the invitations. My parents had flown in from California. The deposits were paid. And I kept thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe he really had changed. And then he invited me to serve drinks." Madison's face crumpled. "When you showed that text, I wanted to die. Because in that moment, I realized that's what he would have done to me eventually. The second I wasn't useful, the second I gained weight or got old or disagreed with his mother, he would have found someone new and made me feel like I was the problem." "You're right," Shayla said gently. "He would have." "How did you survive it? The divorce, the humiliation, starting over?" Shayla thought about it. "Honestly, I almost didn't. I spent 2 months on my best friend's couch, crying every night, believing every lie he'd told me about my worth. What changed? I got angry, not bitter, angry. There's a difference. Bitter makes you small and focused on the past. Angry makes you focused on the future, on proving them wrong. Is that why you built EquiLaw? Partly, but mostly I built it because I saw a real problem that needed solving. The revenge was just a bonus. Madison laughed through her tears. Some bonus. You're worth almost $1 billion. And you're free from a man who would have spent your entire marriage making you feel inadequate. I'd say we both won. They sat in silence for a moment, then Madison asked quietly, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you hate me?" Shayla looked at her, really looked at her. This 29-year-old woman who'd been told she was perfect, who'd been groomed to be the ideal Mitchell bride, who'd almost sacrificed herself on the altar of someone else's expectations. "No," Shayla said honestly. "I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you, and you were being used just like I was. What do I do now? My parents are furious. Patricia Mitchell has been calling nonstop. The wedding vendors want to know about refunds, and I still work at a firm that your company placed me at." Shayla pulled out a folder she'd brought. "About that, I have 3 offers for you." Madison's eyes widened. Option 1, stay at Hartley and Lane. I'll personally recommend you for senior counsel. Significant raise, New York-based. Option 2, join Herbert Smith Freehills in London. Fresh start, totally new city, no connection to Brandon or his world. Great salary. Option 3, come work for EquiLaw, lead our legal affairs division. You'd report directly to me, best salary of the 3 plus equity. Madison stared at the papers. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because I remember what it's like to be treated like collateral damage. And because I believe in lifting up talented women, not tearing them down." "But I almost married the man who destroyed you. And I saved you from actually doing it. Consider us even." Madison started crying again. "I don't deserve this." "Maybe not, but you deserve the chance to become who you are, not who Patricia Mitchell wanted you to be." Madison looked at the 3 offers, her hands shaking. "The London one. I need to get as far away from this as possible." "Smart choice." Shayla slid the paperwork across the table. "Sign here and here. You start in 2 weeks. I'll handle the transition with Hartley and Lane." As Madison signed, she looked up. "Can I ask one more thing?" "Sure. Do you ever regret marrying him? Even knowing how it ended?" Shayla thought about it. "No, because that marriage taught me what I'm worth and what I won't tolerate. Brandon thought throwing me away would break me. Instead, it freed me to become someone he could never imagine." "I want to be like you when I grow up," Madison said with a watery smile. "You're already on your way. You walked out of a wedding in front of 1,000 people rather than marry the wrong man. That takes courage." They finished their coffee, exchanged numbers, and hugged goodbye. As Shayla watched Madison walk away toward her new life, she felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. Not because she'd destroyed Brandon, but because she'd saved another woman from the same fate. While Shayla was having coffee with Madison, Brandon was sitting in a conference room at Sullivan and Cromwell, facing the managing partner and the entire executive committee. It was not going well. "Do you have any idea how many calls we've received since Saturday?" Richard Hartwell asked, his voice cold enough to freeze water. "Sir, 63, from clients, from board members, from the mayor's office." Brandon's throat had gone completely dry. Another partner, Martha Fisher, spoke up. "There's a video of your wedding disaster with 92 million views. 92 million. You're trending on Twitter, not the firm, you." "It's just social media drama." "Is it?" Richard cut him off. "Because 3 clients have already pulled their business. Steinberg Industries cited moral concerns about the firm's judgment and personnel. Mitchell Energy, your father's company, moved their $40 million retainer to Cravath. The CEO sent a personal note saying she couldn't work with a firm that employs classist bullies." Brandon felt like he might throw up. "And Hartley and Lane," Martha continued, "the boutique firm where your ex-fiancé worked? They've threatened legal action against us for creating a hostile work environment by association." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Your ex-wife, who owns the legal staffing company that placed Madison Harrison at that firm, witnessed you publicly humiliate both women. We're lucky she's not suing US." Richard leaned forward. The executive committee held an emergency vote last night. Brandon's hands started shaking. We're asking for your resignation, Brandon, effective immediately. You're firing me? We're giving you the dignity of resignation. I suggest you take it. I've been here for 12 years. I made partner, and you threw it away for ego and cruelty. The firm's reputation is more valuable than your partnership. Sign the papers. Brandon had sat there, staring at the resignation letter, his entire world collapsing. He'd built everything around this job, his identity, his status, his worth. And it was gone. He'd signed with shaking hands. By noon, his office was cleared. By 5 p.m., his security pass was deactivated. By the end of the week, he couldn't get hired anywhere in New York legal circles. Every firm had seen the videos. Every recruiter had read the articles. Every HR department flagged his name. The New York legal community was small, and word traveled fast. Brandon Mitchell was toxic. His mother had stopped returning his calls after the wedding disaster. She'd sent one text. You've embarrassed this family for the last time. Don't contact me until you fix this. His father had been more direct. You're removed from the family trust, effective immediately. You're on your own. His friends from Yale, from the country club, from his previous life, they all went silent. Invitations stopped coming. Group chats went quiet when he posted. People crossed the street to avoid him. Within 3 months, Brandon had lost everything. His job at Sullivan & Cromwell, gone. His $1.4 million salary, gone. His Upper East Side penthouse, sold. He couldn't afford the mortgage. His Porsche 911. Repossessed. His country club membership, revoked. We have standards to maintain. His social standing, destroyed. His relationship with his parents, severed. His engagement to Madison, obliterated. He'd taken a job at a mid-tier firm in New Jersey making $180,000 a year, a fraction of his previous salary. He'd moved to a studio apartment in Queens, the kind of place he would have mocked 5 years ago. He ate ramen for dinner most nights, the same thing he'd mocked Shayla for doing when they were married. The irony wasn't lost on him. One night, lying on his IKEA mattress in his tiny apartment, listening to his neighbors argue through the thin walls, Brandon had Googled Shayla one more time. New headlines. EquiLaw valued at $2.4 billion. CEO Shayla Washington named to Time 100 bars. Shayla Washington establishes $50 million scholarship fund for Black women in law and tech. EquiLaw announces IPO plans could make Shayla Washington youngest Black female billionaire. He'd stared at the articles until his vision blurred. She'd done it. She'd actually become a billionaire, and he'd become nothing. The man who'd called her practice was now living in a studio apartment, eating microwaved meals, and trying to rebuild a career he'd destroyed with his own arrogance. He'd picked up his phone and typed out a text to her number, which he'd never deleted. Shayla, I know you probably hate me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know. I was wrong. About everything. You were never the problem. I was. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too blind and too arrogant to see your worth. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. But it's all I have. B. He'd stared at the message for 20 minutes, then deleted it without sending. She didn't owe him forgiveness. She didn't owe him anything. He'd made his choices. Now he had to live with them. 1 year later, everything had changed. Shayla was the keynote speaker at TechCrunch Disrupt, the biggest tech conference in the world. Her company had gone public 6 months earlier, making her officially a billionaire with a B. Her net worth now sat at $1.3 billion. The auditorium at the Javits Center was packed with 5,000 people. She walked on stage in a custom power suit, her natural hair in an elegant afro, radiating confidence and power. Good morning, my name is Shayla Washington, and 5 years ago, my ex-husband told me I was practice, that I wasn't good enough for his world, that I should take $100,000 and disappear. The audience was dead silent, hanging on every word. Today, EquiLaw serves 97,000 law firms across 12 countries. We've democratized access to legal research for firms and nonprofits that were being priced out of justice. We've created 4,000 jobs, and we're just getting started." Applause erupted. "But this isn't a revenge story," Shayla continued. "This is a liberation story. Because the day I stopped believing his lies about my worth was the day I became unstoppable." She paused, letting that sink in. "To everyone out there who's been told they're not enough, not smart enough, not educated enough, not the right color, not from the right family, I want you to know something. They're wrong. And your job isn't to convince them. Your job is to build something so undeniable that their opinions become irrelevant." Standing ovation, 20 seconds, 30, a full minute of applause. When it finally died down, Shayla finished. "Thank you. Now let's change the world." She walked off stage to another wave of applause. Backstage, she was immediately swarmed by investors, journalists, entrepreneurs wanting advice. And then, through the crowd, she saw him. Brandon. He looked different, thinner, older. His suit was off the rack instead of custom. His hair was graying at the temples. He looked diminished. Their eyes met. He mouthed, "Can we talk?" Shayla nodded, and they found a quiet hallway away from the chaos. Silence stretched between them for a long moment. "That was an incredible speech," Brandon finally said. "Thank you. I've been trying to reach you for months. I sent emails, left voicemails. I know, I got them all. Why didn't you respond?" Shayla looked at him calmly. "Because I had nothing to say. I wanted to apologize properly. You did, at the wedding. I accepted. But I need you to know," his voice cracked. "I destroyed my entire life, Shayla. I lost my job, my family, my reputation, everything. I know, I read about it. Do you feel satisfied? Watching me fall?" Shayla studied him for a long moment, then said something that clearly surprised him. "No." His head snapped up. "I don't feel satisfied watching you suffer, Brandon. I don't feel anything watching you, because you're not part of my life anymore. You're a chapter I closed. But what I did to you, what you did to me was cruel. It was racist and classist and unforgivable. But it also freed me." "Freed you?" "I spent 3 years trying to fit into your world, shrinking myself, questioning my worth, believing that my blackness, my background, my ambition were liabilities instead of strengths." She stepped closer. "You throwing me away was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to stop seeking validation from people who would never see my value. It forced me to build something that proved my value." Brandon's eyes filled with tears. "I was so stupid." "Yes, you were. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." Shayla shook her head gently. "No, Brandon. You threw away a woman who loved you. But I was never the best thing. I was just the thing you couldn't appreciate. Is there any chance?" "No." The word was final, gentle but absolute. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt. I'm just done. I've moved on, and I hope someday you do too." "I don't think I can." "Then that's your prison, not mine." She turned to walk away. "Shayla?" She paused. "I'm sorry for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know. You were right. About everything. I should have seen your worth. I should have protected you. I should have loved you better." She looked back one last time, her expression soft but firm. "I know. And I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Will you ever think of me?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "When I need to remind myself how far I've come. When I need to remember that other people's limitations aren't mine. When I need to feel grateful for the life I built after you." She smiled slightly. "You'll be a cautionary tale I tell young women about the importance of knowing their worth. About not shrinking for anyone. About building their own empires instead of waiting for validation from men who measure worth in all the wrong ways." Brandon stood there, tears running down his face. "Goodbye, Brandon. I hope you find peace. I really do. Goodbye, Shayla. I hope you know you were never practice. You were always the real thing. I was just too blind to see it." She nodded once, then walked away. Back to her life, her company, her empire, her future. Brandon watched her disappear into a crowd of admirers, investors, people who valued her genius. And he finally understood what he'd lost. Not a practice girl, not a stepping stone, but a queen who had always been royalty. He'd just been too small to recognize a crown when he saw one. Shayla Washington never remarried. She didn't need to. She built a $4.2 billion company. EquiLaw now operated in 27 countries, employed over 6,000 people, and had fundamentally changed how legal research worked worldwide. She funded full scholarships for 2,000 Black women in STEM and law. She bought her mother a brownstone in Brooklyn and cried when her mom called it the American dream made real. She endowed the Shayla Washington Center for Access to Justice at Yale Law School, where a portrait of her hung in the lobby. A young Black woman from the South Side who'd become one of the most influential people in legal technology. She spoke at the UN about technology and human rights. She was named to the Forbes 400 Richest Americans. She turned down 3 marriage proposals from successful men because, as she told Keisha, "I'm already married to my purpose." But her favorite moments weren't the awards or the accolades. They were the morning she woke up in her penthouse, made coffee, and looked at the New York skyline thinking, "I built this life. Me." The day a young Black law student emailed her, "Ms. Washington, I saw your story. My boyfriend's family says I'm not good enough, but you showed me I don't need to be good enough for them. I just need to be excellent for me." "Thank you." The afternoon Diane Fisher called and said, "I'm proud of you, Shayla, not for the money, but for staying true to who you are." The moment she stood at her mother's brownstone as her mom whispered, "Baby, you did what I never could. You flew, and you didn't let anybody clip your wings." And every morning, Shayla woke up and smiled at the woman in the mirror. Not because she'd destroyed Brandon, but because she'd built herself. She was whole. She was free. She was powerful. And that was the sweetest victory of all. As for Brandon, he was still at that mid-tier firm in New Jersey, making a fraction of what he used to earn, still estranged from his family, still paying the price for his cruelty. He'd dated a few women over the years, but nothing stuck. They'd Google him, find the videos, read the articles, and slowly distance themselves. He'd become a cautionary tale, the man who had everything and threw it away for ego, the man who called a queen practice and spent the rest of his life knowing what he'd lost. Sometimes, late at night, he'd scroll through articles about Shayla's success, not with bitterness, but with the heavy, aching knowledge that he'd fumbled the greatest thing that ever happened to him. And there was no going back, no second chances, no redemption arc, just the quiet, eternal regret of a man who'd finally learned the difference between price and worth. But by then, it was far too late. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's evolution. It's becoming so successful, so powerful, so undeniably excellent that the people who hurt you become footnotes in your success story. Shayla Washington didn't just survive Brandon Mitchell's cruelty, she transcended it. She built an empire on the ashes of his rejection. And in doing so, she proved the most important truth of all. Your value isn't determined by who couldn't see it. It's determined by what you build when you finally see it yourself. What do you think? Did Shayla do the right thing by exposing Brandon? Should she have stayed home? Drop your thoughts below.